This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra for 2022. Well, there you go. So, you know what? It's a note. Let's just face it, minus the micro SD card slot. The design here with the flat top and the flat bottom, the S Pen living in the silo, and the top of the top specs, well, that makes me happy because I've been a note person since the early days when you had to import them from outside the United States. So, yay that. The good news here is we will also be reviewing the S22 Plus, and I'll be doing a full review of this. This is the first look and first impressions when you've had it for 3 days, and it's a very featureful phone. You can't test everything just yet, but I'm going to give you my impressions and what I think of it to start with right now. So first off, yeah, last year there wasn't a Galaxy Note release, and a lot of people were pretty bummed, but the Ultra had the S Pen, no silo for it. You could get a case that made it even wider to hold the phone, which was a little hard, but it was a hint of maybe merging of the two lines, which makes an awful lot of sense because they had so much in common, right? So this year, they've gone all the way to Samsung. So the S22 Ultra, really, let's call it a note, right? And I'm good with that. I like the flat top and the bottom because it's easier to hold and keep a grip on. The sides are still curved on this, and I can understand why. I mean, versus the S22 and the S22 Plus that have more squared offish sides, this one is still a ginormous phone, and when you have straight sides, it's not the most comfortable thing to hold, even if it does make it maybe a little easier to have a good grip on it. The camera cluster design now has diverged from the other two S22 family members and from last year's design, which featured this new fresh redesign. So there's no surround or that domino look around the camera cluster. The camera and lenses are just there naked. You got all 5 of those things going on the back. Some people think it looks plain. Some people think it looks good. I'm not sure how I feel about that yet. It's not the most important thing in the world, honestly, but it's okay by me. Also, the color selection is good. Where the Ultra family used to be, well, the boring business stayed kind of, you get it like in black and maybe silver or something. Now you can get it in black or white or green or a nice burgundy color. And then there are some special edition colors exclusive to Samsung.com, like the red, which is already sold out, I believe. The special order colors, they will take a couple more weeks to get a hold of. While we're talking about special orders and stuff like that in Samsung.com, let's talk about the pricing. The pricing is still painful at $11.99 starting price. But the good news is same as last year, despite rampant inflation and chip shortages. So that's nice. But you know how it goes with Samsung and with their pre-order deals. So not only do they have typically fairly generous trade-ins on Samsung and Apple phones particularly, but they also throw in $250 for accessories. Now, a lot of the accessories have already sold out. I noticed, they got cases, they got the 45-watt charger, that one's already gone. Galaxy watches, Galaxy Buds, and even credit towards the new Samsung Galaxy Tab S8 family of devices, which looks like also sold out. But anyway, you can get a lot of money off, so you don't have to pay anything close to the retail for the phone. And also, the base model on this has 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage, but they're doing a free upgrade to the 12 gig of RAM and 256 gig of storage model for the same price as base. So yeah, it's expensive, but there you have it. And of course, carriers have all sorts of deals. Retailers, like big retailers like Best Buy, have deals. So you can shop around and not pay these insane prices for the phones. That's good. So as you might guess from what I was just talking about, the specs here for RAM and storage, you can get this with 128, 256, 512, or 1 terabyte storage. So they all have 12 gigs of RAM except for the base model on this. And this is the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 processor. So that's the latest and greatest processor that replaces the Snapdragon 888 processor. Now overseas outside the US, you'll see the Exynos 2200, which supposedly is no slouch this time around, also 4 nanometer like the Snapdragon. It's a little bit faster on benchmarks and things like that. Where we had a multi-core score of around 900 single-core and 3,000 multi-core, we now see about 1,200 and 33 to 3,500. So A bit of an improvement. And what is all this crazy performance used for anyway? For things like computational photography. And obviously the Ultra, the big focus, other than being the new Note, is for the high-end photography because it has the most lenses, the most features, and all that sort of thing. And it does make a difference. For those of you who still use standalone digital cameras, you'll know like your camera has a quad-core processor. You've got a Canon R5 or whatever it is you've got. And it still can't do as much computational photography as these phones can, which is what helps these phones do nice pictures. You got a little Photoshop guru locked in the phone, basically, with these things. So how are the cameras on this? Again, in my full review, I'm really going to go to town. But two things that Samsung said that they improved here were night mode and portrait mode for the edge detection. Particularly, you know how portrait mode can give you a haircut, especially if you have frizzies like I chronically have and hair that goes everywhere. And so I tested on my, well, perfect for this sort of test, hair, right? And yeah, it is better. And yes, it's beating the iPhone 13 Pro Max when it comes to that too. So not only did it leave my little hairs intact, and I left the strand out so we could see what it did with it, and it looked pretty natural, no funny haircuts, no part of an ear gone, that sort of thing. But also the typical pose where you put your arms up like this to see if the space in between gets bokeh blurred as it should. It actually works. So they've done a good job with portrait mode here. I'm pretty impressed. In fact, the portrait of me is actually a very pleasing looking portrait. Whether it was taken with a standalone camera or anything else, I would be pretty pleased with that. Skin tones are pretty good too. I'm a pretty pale person, so I'm probably not the best test case there. I would say they have warmed up skin tones just enough, but not overly warm and not overly orange, especially if you're shooting people of various colors that are more interesting than my pasty white face. So pretty good there. The other thing is the night mode. So they've done what Apple did too, which is to go more natural. The first several generations of night mode, including for standalone cameras like the A7S family from Sony of standalone cameras, which were great for night mode and video, overbrighten things, turning night into a kind of odd looking day, right? So that doesn't represent what you see either if you're looking for something more natural. So they've toned down some of the over brightening. Now, some people will like the brightness and will like that zingy, colorful kind of neon look to things. You can always edit the photo and brighten it up if you want to, or the video for that matter. But I would say that this is quite good. Also, an advantage with the Ultra, more so than ever now, I noticed taking night mode shots, I actually didn't have to go into night mode because you've got wider aperture lens and a bigger sensor on this. And that's ideal because you don't have to stand still for like 6 seconds, right? And you get a more natural looking shot compared to, say, something like the S22 Plus. Another thing that sets the Ultra apart from really every other camera phone on the market are the zoom lenses that are optical zoom. So you've got your 108 megapixel main camera, you've got your 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, and you've got two telephoto lenses, a 3x and a 10x. That's optical, not digital, which means sharpness. Those are 10 megapixel, then it's not the highest resolution, but does it make a difference? And yes, there are improvements this year, especially with the 10x, which I thought looked kind of last year, and now it's looking not so much in night mode. Again, full review to find out everything I'm going to say about that one, though. Now, videography has also improved. Does it beat the iPhone? And iPhone, let's face it, has always been the best at video. Stay tuned for my full review because I've got a lot more testing to do. Oh, by the way, it can shoot 8K video. To me, that's a little bit more of a party trick than anything else. I'll take 4K at 30 frames or 60 frames per second, which it can also do. I find that more useful. And yes, like all smartphone cameras, it still oversharpens landscape. So there's that. Painfully, every blade of grass and every leaf is there in detail. So you might like that. Me, not so much. I do, however, appreciate the fact that they do lift the shadows pretty well with Samsung. You might lose some of that moody silhouette kind of thing, but I like lifting the shadows, which means shadow areas are not fading to black. The phone is clad in Gorilla Glass Victus Plus with an aluminum frame and some recycled fishnet for the plastics inside to be environmentally aware. The display on this is 6.8 inches. Of course, it's AMOLED, as Samsung calls it, or OLED, and it's even brighter than ever. And the outdoor brightness mode goes up to 1750 nits versus 1500 for the previous generation, and a heck of a lot brighter than a lot of other phones on the market that cost less money too, to be fair, right? What does that mean? Well, I'm in Texas where the sun gets awful bright and I have no trouble seeing the screen no matter what. We have Wi-Fi 6E on board. We have 5G ultra wideband and sub-6, as you would expect. So available on all major carriers. You can also get unlocked, which works with all major and minor carriers as well. So the usual story there. No micro SD card slot. I mentioned I'm going to mention it again. So that's something that we remember from the notes of old, but it's gone from all phones, just like the headphone jack, which this also does not have. Speaking of notiness, it has the S Pen with the usual full feature set of you can use air commands with it, you can do screen captures right on the screen, all those useful things, take notes with it even when the phone is off, and the sleeping screen you can write notes to self, all that sort of thing. And now Samsung says that pen latency is reduced even further, which means the speed at which the line draws on screen as you are, well, writing, so you don't perceive any lag. And they have predictive algorithms as to where you're going to go next and all that sort of thing. It's a great experience. It's Wacom EMR as ever. And I love it. It's great stuff. The only thing I don't love so much is how slippery the pen is on the screen. I mean, that thing wants to skate every which way. I use it more for art than for note-taking. For note-taking, it probably won't bother you as much as it will for art, where you need a lot of fine control to not accidentally do a whoopsies and zig a line when you didn't mean to. It would be interesting to see a matte screen protector for this. But, you know, and you can use bigger S Pens with this. Wacom EMR, it's standard again. I tried it with the dual function $99 S Pen that you can use also with the Galaxy Z Fold 3. It has a mode for fold and it has a mode for everything else in the world. Speaking of the Fold 3, yeah, thanks to that kind of rubbery screen protector that it has, you do have less pen slip. That's one thing to be said. So it's flagship land. So what does that mean? No charger in the box, which is ever so much more a bummer because this actually supports 45-watt fast charging. That's the same wattage charger you get with your typical Ultrabook Windows PC laptop. Very fast charging. Glad to see that back again. Sad that's not in the box, but if you have a laptop charger, you should be able to use that just fine. And especially that's great because Samsung sold out of their own 45-watt chargers for phones. And it supports 15-watt wireless charging, which is still called fast wireless charging. And, well, it's not that fast, let's face it, especially when you have a 5,000 milliamp battery to charge. So that's a capacious battery. And after 3 days, I can't say for sure how battery life is, but so far it's looking just every bit as good as you think it would be. So obviously you have choices here. Well, I mean, there's the S22 Plus. For example, if you want the Samsung experience with One UI 4 and Android 12 and all that sort of thing, you don't want to spend quite as much, you know, you save $200. Or if you don't like the big honkingness of the phone, because it is, but beyond that, there's obviously Google Pixel 6 Pro, which has excellent cameras. It may not have 10x optical zoom, though, which to me does make a difference. The Ultra is a phone that you can take to the zoo and actually capture the animals sharply, which is nice. But Pixel 6 Pro has been a little bit of a cranky customer this time around, which is surprising because usually Google doesn't throw far-flung features in, but they get things right. And it's been a little more buggy, let's say, overall as a phone. So right now I'm leaning towards the faster fingerprint scanner and actually having facial recognition for unlocking the phone on the Samsung. But I know some people are still Pixel fans. Obviously, there's OnePlus. The OnePlus 10 Pro is coming out. Not out yet, though. There's still the 9 Pro. You'll get better photography from the Ultra, but then again, you might find the OnePlus at a better price. It's not a cheap phone either, though. And then for those of you who are iOS, Android agnostic, obviously, there's still the iPhone 13 Pro Max. I've reviewed that. There's enough reviews out there. It really does depend on which design aesthetic you like, how much you want that 10x optical zoom on the Ultra, among other things, though. And for those of you who are bored to death with slab phones, there's obviously the Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3, which is actually less expensive by $200. Then you get a little folding flip phone. Not as good cameras, not as good battery life. That's the weak point for the Z Flip 3, but if you're fold curious or flip curious, there's that. And there's obviously the even more expensive Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 3, which unfolds to a tablet. But for those of you who maybe tried a folding phone and maybe had problems with the screen breaking or the screen protectors or something like that, and you're looking to go back to the best you can get in a slab phone, obviously that's where the Ultra might appeal. I'm Lisa from MobileTechReview. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for the full review of this phone as well as the S22 Plus. And thumbs up if you like this vid.